Hey, welcome back to the show. Today, I am hanging out with Ron Sanders, who you might know from any multitude of his different career paths. If you don't know Ron, I'm going to let him give you a breakdown in a second. How you doing, Ron?
Doing well. How are you today?
Good, good. Usually joined by my friend Bruce. For everyone watching, Bruce may or may not show up. We'll see. If he jumps into the conversation, I think that'll be a fun gag.
Maybe he
So
lost his hat and he's hunting for it now.
maybe the hat lost him.
Maybe.
Give us a bullet point breakdown of for people that don't know you of your work of your sort of history with art.
When I was at Dragon Con, which is where we met, I went around introducing myself to people as the guy who's been in the business for 30, 35 years that no one knows.
Yeah,
Because I've done so many different things and I've always made money at my art, but haven't been established in one area where I've really become famous. And so over the years, I've done work for newspapers, calendars, posters, greeting cards, textbooks, historical work for textbooks I did for a while, done stuff for television a little bit, promotional advertising. And all along that time, I got out of Columbus College of Art and Design in December of '89, just as the digital revolution was starting to take off. And so I didn't get any digital training. Recession of '90 hit, and I lost a job in Florida that I was ready to shoot right out into, right out of school, and went from the promise of $70,000 a year and living 2 blocks from the beach in Florida to living in my parents' basement, making $650 an hour, working at a print firm, where the benefit was I got to learn digital stuff. They had a new Mac computer and they're like, we don't know how to use this. So every morning come in and spend a couple hours learning how to do this stuff and then go back and, do the manual stripping of negs and typesetting and, all that stuff. So I have both that old school way of doing stuff and the new digital way of doing stuff. But within a few years out of school, I had my first agent in New York for illustration and my first gallery representing me in Fort Wayne, Indiana, which is where I was from.
you said that
And
you're
so,
not famous doing anything, but so far this sounds like the fastest slingshot to success I've ever heard an artist talk about.
well, okay, I had the agent in New York. We did a few pieces together. I did a piece for Doubleday Book Club and
Hmm.
a couple other pieces. And then the guy was retiring and handing the business over to his son, and it just kind of fizzled out for a number of reasons. And I decided to move on. So that didn't really go anywhere. I worked briefly with another agent for a few years doing textbook stuff she was in Chicago, but didn't officially represent me on her stable of artists. It was just like, hey, if we get some jobs and you want them, we'll shoot them to you. So I did some of that, but I also was pursuing fine art. And over the years I was looking at my list earlier, officially 17 galleries, exhibited in more than that, probably a couple dozen. And there's some fine artists that are only in like one or two galleries their whole career. So why was I in so many? Well, because many of the galleries that I got into were startup galleries that didn't last. Either they had to change their direction to stay in the business or they went out of business. And so I hopped around coast to coast, U.S. Virgin Islands. I've shown all over the United States, plus the Caribbean. Um, in 2005, I had a cancer scare, was out of, thought I was going to have to leave art entirely, was out of it for a couple of years, ended up as the art director of a gallery in Sarasota, Florida, got back into the fine art through that, them representing my work. Um, was gallery director there, as I said, for a season, and then got back into my fine art and hit that hard for a few more years. And 2010, got in with the United States Mint through their artistic infusion program, designing coins and commemoratives and congressional gold medals for the U.S. government, which I still do. Got one more year on that contract. And now kind of getting back into pursuing my illustration background and career. So it's just been all over the place.
Yeah, that's how we met. Bruce put it really well whenever he met you. He said, Ron's trying to get into an industry we're all trying to get out
Yep.
of.
Yep.
I don't
And
actually
you,
think everyone's trying to get out of it. I think people are
well,
tentative about the movement of AI, right?
yeah,
But I don't think the illustration industry is going anywhere. Uh, so when you say okay, couple questions. Uh, First, you talked about getting into galleries.
yeah.
So when you say getting into a gallery, do you mean you're having multiple shows or a relationship with the same gallery, or is it one show that's
Full
all you?
representation, where they're,
Representation. Okay.
yeah, where you're under contract to provide them with fine art on an ongoing basis for them to sell. And so, like I said, I've been 17 galleries that I've actually had a contract with to provide them with work.
I
And some of
see.
those were very short contracts, and others, there's technically, I'm still with one. Um, Quentin Cordair Fine Art in Napa, California, officially still has work of mine. Um, but I don't think I show up on their website anymore because I
Hmm.
haven't given them anything for like 8 years.
So you're not doing calls for artists, basically.
I
When
never
galleries
found
put out
galleries had calls for artists, fine
really.
art galleries. So no, I would, and we can get into talking about how, what are the ways to get into fine art galleries if you want to go that route. Um, but yeah, I never saw a call for artists
Yeah, we'll
in
get
Florida.
into we'll get into that. The next question was Sarasota, Florida. That's where Ringling College is, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
There are several large name illustrators that live down there and teach at Ringling. So
Yeah,
is that where you live?
I did for a while. 2006, my family packed it up out of Fort Wayne, Indiana, and we decided to go someplace sunny and warm. And we went down there and lived from 2006 till 2023. It was just the beginning of last year. We moved up here to Tennessee. So my kids grew up in Florida.
Hmm.
They don't remember anything but that growing up. Um, but yeah, we were in Sarasota County. Started out in Venice, which is kind of mid county,
Yeah.
and then we moved down to Northport, Florida, which is the south end of the county. And then the last few years we were down in Punta Gorda in Charlotte County, south of that. But yeah, I had friends who worked there at Ringling. One of the people that I work with through the United States Mint is currently on staff there.
Oh,
Um, my friend that I mentioned off air before we got started here, Dominic Avant, who used to be with Disney, works at Ringling. Some of the other guys I used to go out plein air painting with would teach part time at Ringling. It's a good program.
that's awesome. Yeah, I
And
know. At least I think I know. I'm pretty sure Sean Andrew Murray works there. Did you meet him at Dragon Con?
we did not talk, I don't believe.
Oh wow, yeah, he's been teaching there for a while. He gave me a big pitch on it years ago.
Yeah,
Great school apparently. Everyone I see skyrocket to the industry comes out of Ringling. So
it's a good school. Yeah. My son looked at going there for their film program
hmm,
and decided he wanted a little more diverse campus. So he went to Florida State for a while.
yeah. All right, and then the Mint. My third question about your
Mhm.
biography there. The Mint. You said your contract's almost up. So that's about 15 years? Is that all one
It'll be
contract
it'll
or?
be 15 years. No, we have rotating contracts,
Hmm,
and I guess we're going to talk more about my work for the U.S. Mint later. But in general, the U.S. Mint under their Artistic Infusion program has they do have a call for artists
hmm,
every few years, and um, they'll get hundreds of people that submit, and they'll select a handful. Usually, at the most, we have about 2 dozen artists working for the AIP at any one time. And as people drop out for various reasons, either they don't get their contract renewed or they decide that they have other obligations that are taking their time and they decide not to continue with it. And so as the number dwindles, then they'll have another call for artists to try to kind of restock their numbers and get more people on board. But for those of us who are in it, usually you have your initial contract is it's a 1 year contract with 4 years of renewal. So it's 5 years total, but it's renewed annually. And so at any annual renewal, they can decide not to renew for any one of a number of reasons. Um, if you stay with the So say you're in year three of a contract, but they have another call for artists. What they'll usually do is take their, contact their existing artists and say, we really recommend that you go ahead and resubmit under the new call for artists, because either our contract has changed and it will be to your benefit to be under that new contract, or it'll just add another 5 years. So it's going to extend the number of years you're with us so you don't drop out, so we can keep you, you know, ongoing with us. And so every time there was a call for artists, I submitted
Hmm.
and kept it going. But yeah, after 15 years of this, we're ready to, I think,
Or
move
part
different
ways.
direction. I'm missing painting as part of it, because the mint work is all drawing.
Right. I feel that way. Sometimes I do projects or Grimo Press where I do a cover and then I'll do, 10, 12 interior drawings. And even though it's the drawings themselves, the interior work, arguably easier than a full scale painting, right? It's not really why it doesn't have the same passion for me
Yeah.
as painting. So I miss that. So I can relate there. Anyway, galleries. I've
No,
never. Okay, that would be a lie. I've shown in galleries, but
mm,
it is an entirely alien world to me. Uh,
it is to a lot of people.
how would I go about if I wanted to get my work into a gallery? What do I do?
Trying to decide the best way to dive into that. What do you want to paint and sell as fine art? What kind of work are you trying to approach?
well, I don't. I'm not. So it was sort of a what if. I'm not personally looking to get into galleries, but
Okay. Well, so let's take it from a hypothetical.
yeah.
What sells in fine art galleries? So, first off, what kind of galleries are we talking about? There's different kinds of galleries. And so you've got your very small type galleries that have, maybe it's a co-op, maybe it's a lot of hobby painters from a local market to get together and they decide to open a gallery and sell their stuff. And they'll put anything in there: arts, crafts, sculpture, anything, any media.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've seen those kind of
A lot
galleries.
of
Then
local.
you've,
Yeah.
yeah, the little local galleries. And then those are generally easy to get into. If you're willing to, work one weekend a month or something, you can get your artwork in there and participate and be a part of the local group. Then you've got the more mid-range galleries for the little bit larger cities where there's some kind of a buying public, and there's actually, somebody who owns the gallery and that is going to sign you on as, part of their stable of artists to represent you and try to sell your work. And that's the majority of galleries in the country. You'll find them in cities all across the country. When I mentioned being in 17 art galleries around the nation, um, those are the kinds of galleries that I was primarily in. Then you've got the major markets, which are, you've got New York, Chicago, LA, but then you've got some other really big markets like Scottsdale, Santa Fe, Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Miami definitely has its own art scene. We were talking about that, earlier. So there's, there are, there, you want to
We.
figure out what kind of market you're going for, because those big markets that we just talked about,
Mhm.
depending on which one it is,
All right. So we
like,
have a lot of our shows are mostly watched by other fantastical illustrators, right? So we're not. I don't think we're going the route of nailing a banana to a wall, or taping a banana to a wall. So let's say that it's like the Donato Giancola types, where you're
yeah.
sort of
So
bridging
I
into
mean, I
fine
figure
art.
we're talking about representational realism
Yeah.
primarily,
Okay.
is what people want to paint, but there's still this range. And so, like during the Great Recession, there were, and 9/11 was the same way. You had people that typically bought $70,000 paintings that were still buying art, but now they were buying $30,000 paintings. And you got people who were buying $30,000 paintings that maybe cut back and they were buying $5,000 to $10,000 paintings. But the majority of artwork that sells around the country is in the $2,000 to $5,000 range. And the people who buy $2,000 to $5,000 paintings during a recession or a 9/11 type event just stopped buying because they didn't know what was coming and they didn't have that money. So the fine art market you have to understand, and I know artists hate to hear this, and they like to argue that art is an essential of life. It's essential to your soul. Trash collection is essential.
Yes.
You're going to pay for trash collection and health services and things like that. When times get tough and people don't have disposable income, they don't buy original artwork from galleries. They might buy a print or poster from Walmart or the
Hmm.
home decor store, or print something out on their printer from a cool image they saw online or whatever, just have something stuck on their wall, calendar art, whatever. But they don't necessarily go and buy fine art, and so it is an economically sensitive market. And I struggled in and out of recession, depression cycles all the years that I was in fine art, and saw the results of that. Um, so if you're in that average gallery that's going to be selling your work in the $2,000 to $5,000 range, you've got to be prepared that there could be those years where there's uncertainty. I mean, even heading into an election as we are this year, there's a lot of people that'll be like, I'm not doing anything with my money until I see who wins the election. And so you may have 6 months where nothing really happens because you've got people who are just sitting on the sidelines waiting to see.
Right. So even though you're in a gallery, and let's say
Doesn't mean you're selling.
you as the artist, you're constantly working and maybe shipping work off. Yeah, you're not seeing. So it's sort of like maybe conventions in a way where the income's up, down, up, down.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, and art always sells for an emotional purpose. Fine art. If somebody's buying something to hang on their wall, they're buying it because they love it, because they
yep.
want to live with it. As opposed to a commercial where, type client where it's like, I've got a problem I need solved and I'm going to hire you to solve it. Give me this image so I can slap it on the product and send it up press. Fine art, people take their time, they shop around, they think about it. They may be in and out of galleries, they may look at a piece multiple times, and it's when they can't stop thinking about that one piece that they'll finally say, okay, I'm going to buy that. I've got to have that. I've got to hang that on my wall. I want to live with that. And so it tends to be things that they want to live with. So what sells in galleries? Well, the three main categories are figurative work, landscapes, and still life in reverse order.
Right. Yeah. It's
So landscapes are the number one seller because they're ubiquitous and everybody can, live with a landscape on their wall.
right.
Still life is second in popularity. And then figurative work is last. And there are some markets in the country where there are people who say, I don't want to hang a picture, especially a portrait type picture of somebody I don't know on my wall.
That's the biggest issue. Yeah.
This freaks me out. And
And
other
like
people are like, I don't know what the problem is. It's a beautiful painting.
I
So
have
you
that problem with like any narrative portraiture. That's so I mentioned conventions. My book cover work almost never sells because you have to know the story. You have to know the person. So,
yeah,
when I'm looking for art for my house, I don't just hang up. At least in the living room, I don't hang up pictures of random people, no
yeah.
matter how much I like the picture.
And I know collectors who do. Um, so so you've got subject matter and how people react to it emotionally is a big part of sales. The other part is the financial ability to buy art, and the third is how much they prioritize owning art. So I have known multimillionaires who have posters on their walls and have said flat out, "I will never buy an original work of art,"
Hmm.
but they have yachts and cars. They put their money where their passion is.
Right.
I know other people who have very modest homes and an old rusted sedan sitting in the driveway, but custom built their home to have a long hallway to exhibit their fine art. So it's not necessarily that rich doesn't necessarily equate to buyer of fine art, but you still have to find somebody who has a disposable income that they're willing and desire to invest in fine art. And obviously, they still have to have the disposable income. So if somebody's scraping by paycheck to paycheck, they're not going to buy from you.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there's plenty of people who complain about the evil rich. It's like don't go too far down that road because that's your clientele. Those are the people you're selling to.
Yeah.
Um,
No,
so
it's besides. I mean, even the highest price I sell something at a convention is $500, and I've seen people come up and fall in love with a picture that they need, they need to have, and you can tell they're sort of struggling with the cost. And then I've had those sort of the same experience, except they can buy it outright. They don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about tent shows before. We were discussing that. And if you go to a tent show, craft show kind of situation, which I've done those as well, I had people, I had my originals up, and it was the same kind of thing as the conventions where it was overpriced for the average person going to that kind of show.
Mhm.
The people who sold most were selling prints or things that were mass produced that they could sell at a lower price point. So they
Yeah.
might have created an original work of art, but then they,
So,
made a bunch of posters of it that they could sell at a price point that people could easily walk through and be like, oh, that's a nice picture. I'll pay you whatever, 20 or $50 for it or whatever it was. But if you have a picture hanging on the wall that's 1,200 or 2,000 or 5,000, people will be like, yeah, that wasn't really, a tent show in a field isn't really the place people want to drop down that kind of cash.
right. Yeah, you might find, someone, but the chances are lower.
Yeah.
Did the galleries ever request that you see? I've been to galleries where you can buy prints of the work on the wall. Did they ever do that? Did they ever request prints from you?
None of my galleries ever did. I was only in, I think, two galleries that even carried prints. So most of the galleries I was in were what I would consider pure fine art galleries. They only had original paintings and sculpture, and most of what they carried were oil paintings. In the fine art world, oil paintings still have that sense of being worth more money because we know they last 500 years, if they're made right. We have that history. People aren't as sure about acrylic paintings. Seem to be holding up well if you use good quality paints. Watercolors, we know, are sensitive to light. So even though a watercolor can be gorgeous, they tend to, generally speaking, no hard and fast rules, generally speaking, they tend to sell for less money than oil paintings. So if you want to make money in galleries, oils is a good way to go. And then you got to keep in mind that if you get into an art gallery, the average gallery contract is that the gallery takes 50%.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I was
So if you want to make $1,000 on a piece, you got to sell it for two.
right. I was always pitched on the 60-40 was common when I was coming through art school. They would always tell us 60-40, where you're getting 60, the gallery's getting 40.
I've
You've never found that?
never talked to an art gallery that went 60-40.
That's interesting.
All the
Okay.
galleries all across the country. And I've been from Marblehead, Massachusetts to Texas to Napa, California, to, 50-50.
Wow.
And so, you think about doing an illustration job and you're getting paid $500 for it, maybe, or 1,000. And you think, well, to make that same money in a piece of fine art, I got to sell it for double that, plus the framing costs, plus the shipping costs to get it to the gallery.
And it brings new light to, when you said between the most common $2,000 to $5,000 range, it brings that to light where it's really what, 1,000 to 2,500.
Yeah.
So
If
you're
that,
to
by the
make a
time you add
living
your expenses.
wage. Let's say that you're making 2,500. I mean, you're selling between 10, 15, and 20 on a low end, on a low wage per year. I cannot imagine painting 15 to 20 paintings in a year and only coming away with, $30,000.
That's about what I lived on all those years. Yeah.
That's surprising to me.
Raising three kids
Wow.
around $30,000 to $40,000 a year. Yeah.
Well, that
Gross.
finishes the podcast. I don't need to know more about galleries.
Yeah. And that was my gross, before business expenses and taxes and insurance.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Huh.
So,
Why do the galleries take such a big cut? Because they're
well,
they're the vendor.
it used to be that galleries actually did a lot of work to build a following for an artist and promote you and advertise and do all the work to get people to know your name and to want to follow you. Part of the reason that I kind of started moving away from it was, well, there's a number of things that happened. I mentioned 9/11. My first one-man show was the week of 9/11. Nobody showed up. We had a lot of food left over. A buddy of mine sponsored that at a club in Indianapolis, and he just laughed and took me to dinner. And yeah, that was the end of it. And he went to see if he could get his money back for reserving
Mhm.
the place. But those events kind of happen, and when something like 9/11 happens or the Great Recession, there's a lot of galleries that don't survive because there's a lot of people who open art galleries who think, oh, well, wouldn't it be cool to move to this resort area and I'll rent a place and I'll hang some work on the walls, and that's all there is to it. And they don't really know how to sell fine art.
Right.
And there was even one guy that had worked in New York for decades as an art director for commercial work, and everything went digital, and he missed handling and smelling the oils and the original works of art. So he decided to move again to a tourist area, open a gallery, and like in 6 months, he was bemoaning to me, is like, this is so different than selling commercial work. It's a completely different animal. And I don't know if I'm gonna survive. And he didn't. It takes more than just opening the doors and hoping tourists walk in and buy stuff. And if you don't know really how to sell fine art, then it'll last. And so a lot of these galleries end up going belly up, and then hopefully you get your artwork back when they do. um, I haven't always.
That
um,
makes, yeah, they're trying to, with the 50%, they're trying to keep their own doors open. I guess I never think about it that way.
yeah.
When you think of the word gallery, right, all caps, you
Mhm.
think of a very high end place. Maybe it's a restaurant, almost like a small museum. Uh, and you think they're fine on the money, and you wander in, you buy art, you don't buy art.
Yeah.
You never think of these types of places struggling.
The rents are high in the kind of areas where galleries tend to set up. um, Not always. I mean, you've seen like in New York where there's a rundown part of town, and all galleries move in and they open these little um, boutique shops and whatever, and they get the art crowd all goes there and they drink their wine and their coffee and whatever, and then the rich people start realizing that it's a cool place to hang out, and they go in and they convert every place to high rises, and then the rents go up and the art crowd moves to another area. So there's some of that, but in New York everything's expensive, even if you're in the poor neighborhood. In a lot of these other towns, rent's rent. Whether it's high or low, you got to pay that. You got to pay your utilities. You got to pay, insurance fees. It's all the costs of doing business, heat and air conditioning and all the rest, signage and marketing.
Right.
And if you've got a staff working for you, then you got to pay for the staff. And so you've got to sell a lot of work to make enough to break even. And you talk about having to do 10, 15, 20 paintings a year, depending on the kind of work you do and the price point you're selling in, that may not be a big deal. I mean, the guys who go and plein air paint, they can do one a day, and they can go on a week's vacation and come home with half dozen pieces easy, maybe more. But if you're doing a big figurative painting that you're spending a few weeks on, then that gets to be a little bit different. But here's the thing: you finish the work, you spend a few $100s on framing, and you get it all looking real nice. And then depending on where your gallery is, you might have to spend a few $100s more to ship it across the country to the gallery. And that's only if the gallery decides they want it. Because just because you are represented by them and just because you painted it doesn't mean they want to hang it.
Mhm.
They might look at it and be like, that's a really nice painting. Alan, you've done a great job on that, but we just don't think it's going to sell to our clientele in this market. Good luck. We hope you can sell it somewhere else. Or you can send it to them and it may sell like that because the right person walks in the door and it just gets snatched off the wall. Or it may sit in their gallery for 10 years before they finally find the right buyer for it. I've had both happen to me over the years.
Huh.
Um, the problem is when it sells like that, the galleries have a tendency to be like, that was awesome, that sold really quickly, give us five more of those. And talk to the people in the gallery world, the artists who sell in galleries, and they'll all say, don't fall for that trap. Because what happens is you got lucky that the right person with a passion for that work happened to walk in the door the day it was hung and
Mhm.
they bought it. That doesn't mean if you have five more hanging on the wall that you're going to find somebody else who has that same passion, who connects with that piece in the same way. And so you may send them more of that same kind of thing, and they may not sell at all.
So what do you do? I mean, right, you're not entirely relying on the gallery. I mean, let's say you've got two, three paintings lying around. The gallery sent them back. They didn't sell. I mean, they're not just going to sit in your closet for years. You're going to try and sell them, right?
So here's the thing is you got to be careful about being in competition with your galleries.
Okay.
So like I mean, at one point I was in, I don't know, 8 or 10 galleries, maybe all at once around the country. But here's the thing that just because, so maybe how do I want to go about this? Oh, I got all these things spinning through my heads. All right. So number one thing that sells is landscapes, I told you, right? Okay. So let's say I've got a gallery in Marblehead, Massachusetts, and I've got one in Tucson, Arizona. Do you think they're selling the same landscapes?
No.
No. People in Marblehead are selling New England ocean scenes, sailing ships, and the people in Tucson are painting Southwest landscapes.
Right.
So just because I painted it for Marblehead and they decided they didn't want it, I can't turn around and send it to Tucson because it doesn't fit their market.
Right. Okay.
And if I can try with permission of my galleries, I can sell some stuff directly online, but then I have to also make sure that my prices are in line with what my galleries are selling for, so I'm not undercutting them.
That's strange to. That's where I was going with is online sales. You know, with an explosion of social media the last 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
You said if with permission. I mean, you own the copyrights to it, but you sign a non-compete with yourself when you sign up for a
It is
gallery.
not in your professional best interest to undercut the galleries that are representing you.
Hmm.
So let's say that you have a piece that's for sale in a gallery for $2,000 and you've got a comparable piece, size and complexity, that you're trying to sell yourself. And you think, well, the gallery takes 50%. I'm only getting $1,000 out of it. So I'm going to put it online for $1,000 and see if I can sell it. Well, now you've got somebody who's looking around online and they see that your work of art is sold in this gallery for 2,000, but you've got it for sale on your website for 1,000, and they think, aha, why should I go through the gallery and pay double when I can go direct to the artist and get the wholesale price?
Yeah, you've undermined your own self.
You've undermined the gallery, in which case they're like, we don't want to do business with you anymore because
Right.
you're taking business away from us.
Okay. All right.
So when I started out, I went, and in different markets have different amounts. So when I started out in Fort Wayne, Indiana, my hometown, I was pretty low priced on some work. And then I started sending out to bigger galleries around the country. And the gallery people were like, well, we like your work, but your prices are too low for our market. You're under all of our other artists. Is it okay if we like double or triple the price on your work? And I was like, that's awesome. That's great. And so they did. But then the price, again, I can't undercut them in my home market. So then I couldn't sell the stuff in the smaller markets because it was too expensive. So there's a balancing act of the size of markets that you're in and how you balance between those, what you sell online and at what price points. So if you're the kind of person that likes promoting your own stuff, and you're good at it, social media and developing a mailing list and getting a following, you may want to bypass the galleries altogether and
Right.
just sell fine art online, create your own gallery. The second thing that you can do is open your own fine art gallery, actually rent a space and have your art in there and maybe represent some friends. And I know people who've done that. And I don't know if you're familiar with C.W. Mundy out of Indianapolis. He's a nationally known fine artist. He started out in illustration, used to do these very tight realism sports illustrations when he was younger. And then he went to doing plein air landscape painting. And he and his wife, from the stories I've heard, decided, and this was back like in the 80s, early 90s, I think, decided that he was going to have to do this, before social media, do an ad campaign blitz in magazines. And it was going to cost him $30,000 for a year of mass, advertising. So they saved up their money, did whatever they had to do, got the money together, and they did that. And he started to get traction, and he ended up opening his own gallery And things did take off for him that way. And he got his name, he got his work in front of people. Um, and he was doing it there in Indianapolis where he lived. He was entering the local shows, which, because Indy is the capital, it was also the state show every year was in Indy, and he'd get in and he'd win awards and stuff. And so he started getting a following there in a city of that size. But I remember him telling a story at one point about taking a trip to France, and he would paint his plein air pieces on loose canvas, and he'd have them just laid out, around the hotel room drying. And then at the end of his trip, he would take newspaper and sandwich the paintings, the canvases, between layers of newspaper, and then just roll them up and kind of tuck in the ends. And he walked on the plane with it just tucked under his arm, like it's just a rolled up newspaper, because he wasn't going to send it through baggage.
Oh yeah, no.
And it was like, I forget what he said. It was like $120,000 worth of artwork tucked under his arm, heading onto the plane after his vacation. And he got home and put it in his gallery and sold all this stuff, because he had, hey Bruce.
Hello.
He had the following there to get it sold at that point in his career, pretty much, as soon as he got home.
Did you lose your hat?
I usually don't have my hat for these things. You know that.
You made a joke at the beginning that you didn't show up because you lost your hat. Hey,
Oh.
I
Bruce.
thought maybe you were on
Or the
scouting
hat.
around trying to find it. That's why you were late, didn't you?
The hat consumed me. No, it was just a very late night. My son had his tonsils out, and
Oh.
You guys have both had tough weeks. There's stuff going on. Wow.
I think Bruce is tougher.
Life of an
Actually,
artist.
Bruce's son's week is tougher.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, he had the worst one.
Is he getting lots of ice cream now?
Yes, ice cream and all the rest of that. But
That's
when
good.
you wake up in the middle of the night crying, it
Yeah.
doesn't help too much.
Oh,
How
man.
old is he?
He is 6.
6.
We've never had him on the podcast. We need to interview.
Oh, the littlest art director.
Yeah. What's it like being the son of an artist?
To give you, Dad, thumbs down. If he's not, wait. By the time he's 20, he will be.
My only thing with that is I can always tell if what I'm doing is a good painting or not, because if Sarah comes in the room and doesn't say anything, I just hang my head defeated. I'm like, okay. Sarah's my wife, not my daughter or son, but it's
Family
I'm sure you
feedback
have a
is
little bit of that. Sometimes I won't let her in here. I'm like, no, I know it's bad. Just go away.
It's at the ugly stage. Don't look.
Don't get out of here. Because when people see your work, you can always tell whether they like it or not. Because if they like it, they're going to say something. They always go, "Oh wow!" It's 99% of the time.
Yeah.
Whether they know you or not. And yeah, Bruce, we were talking about galleries. Ron so far has pitched me on never applying or to
I was
any
going to say,
gallery
we
show.
should have gone down a negative path
gallery.
a little bit here on the complexities of it.
I've learned that galleries charge 50%, which I didn't know.
Oh, you didn't know that?
I didn't know. I thought it was like 60, which would still be a lot. But
if you're a big enough name, you can negotiate that. And I know one artist that sells so well that he actually said, as galleries kept coming to him saying, "Please let us carry your work," he's like, "Fine, I take 80%. And if you want me, that's the cost of it." And they're like, "Okay, fine." Because his work sells so well, and he's so famous,
I've also learned that you can't compete against yourself if you're in a gallery. They don't want you selling on websites, for multitude of reasons.
You can sell on the website. You can't sell for less than they're selling for.
Oh, I thought you said with their permission, right?
Well, you want to negotiate that,
And it's probably...
They don't want to feel like somebody can get a better deal by cutting the gallery out and going direct to you.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's what we mean by not competing with them.
So how do you become Thomas Kincaid?
Don't. You don't want to.
Don't become Thomas Kincaid.
Don't become Thomas Kincaid. And if you want, do you want to know why?
He had a sad end, so I assume
it wasn't just his end. No one in the fine art gallery community would speak to him. He was shunned by the art community. As far as the fine art community was concerned, he had sold his soul to the devil for money, and he had zero respect. There's a lot of people, including family members of mine and friends, who like his stuff. He started out, doing landscape stuff for Disney, and you can tell all this stuff kind of looks like
Sure,
the seven
sure. Well,
dwarfs should march out of the little cottages. But it's feel good art, and there's nothing wrong with that. But none of the galleries that represent, there were all the Thomas Kincaid galleries around the country. Um, a lot of them didn't like him. The company had demands on that they had to buy a minimum amount of artwork every month to continue to be
wow.
the Thomas Kincaid Gallery, whether they could sell it or not. I was amazed as I traveled the country and I talked to Thomas Kincaid Gallery owners and people that they were like, he's popular right now, and the day he stops being popular, we'll take his name off over the door in a flash.
Right, right. So he was in
So
a
no,
position
don't
to
try to
put them
become
to the
Thomas Kincaid.
screws, and
Yeah, he had a
he
lot of
really
money,
did.
yeah.
So I think I wanted to get to the mint stuff, but Bruce, since you're joining us, did you have anything on the gallery side you really wanted to know from a? The gallery thing's sort of alien to me. I mean, I know the things like the
Well,
the
there are other topics that we kind of outlined in advance
Well,
that we can
yeah, I
discuss.
think this is supposed to be a quid pro quo, isn't it, Alan? We're supposed to give some information about conventions in return for spilling for him spilling the beans on the gallery scene, right?
Well, I thought it would be fun to like halfway through flip it and let him interview us
Oh,
since he
okay.
thought of all the
Well,
questions.
I did want to find
We
out more
never
about
get
doing the
interviewed.
conventions. Yeah, we joked about the fact that I'm coming from 25 years of fine art stuff and trying to get back into illustration, as you guys are coming from illustration, wanting to get over into fine art. And I think what we're finding in today's economy is that most artists are trying to do both. We're
Yeah,
trying to sell our original work, and we're trying to find clients who will give us immediate payment for jobs that they need.
Well, I think because you can, right? I mean,
But it's
social
also
media
a
is
financial
easy.
necessity, I think, at this point for a lot of people.
We're talking about galleries, but yeah, I agree. But galleries, where do they stand whenever everyone can be their own gallery these days?
Yeah. Well, and during some of those hard financial times, half the galleries in the country went out of business, and the galleries that were left that used to welcome me in and want to talk to me and look at my portfolio. The last time I toured the country out west and went through all the galleries, 2014, and they weren't speaking to me.
Hmm.
They were not welcoming at all because they had so many artists because of all the galleries that had gone out of business. So many
right,
other
right.
artists flooding in saying, please, please, please represent me. And then all the illustrators that were starting to say, hey, we're starting to see maybe not as much work. We need to see if we can sell our originals. And so they had too many artists and not enough wall space. But I'll tell you, the number one way a gallery owner or director will get rid of you is to say, we don't have room. We're all booked. We don't have space on the wall. And it's not really true. It's always said that if your work really is impressive enough and they think they can make money on it, they will make room on the wall. Most galleries have more work than what they have on their wall, and they rotate it. So
Sure.
part of the time your work is in a back closet, and it gets spun around. I talked about the fact that I was a director of a gallery for a season in Sarasota, and that was very eye-opening to kind of see what's necessary to keep a business going from that side of things. But some of like how do you get into a gallery? I don't know if you want to touch on some of these other things.
Well, that was actually the first question I asked you is I want to get into a gallery. How do I do it?
Well, we kind of got sidetracked on all the preliminary stuff first, but to get in, it used to be back in the old days when I started out, you could send a mailing. You'd get postcards or something like that, and you'd send it off to a gallery or some photos, and you'd say, "This is
Not
my
too
work."
different than reaching out to an art director in the old days. Then, yeah,
Right. And they might get back to you with a letter rejecting you, or saying, "We like your work and we'd like to see more." That is kind of hit or miss when you're sending that kind of stuff. Then we got into the digital stuff, and people started sending emails. And you can send digital pictures, same as with commercial art directors. But I have found that one of the best, and I got into plenty of galleries through those means, but one of the best ways to get in, especially as things got more competitive, was to travel the country, go to a market where you want to get represented, have a gallery in mind that you want to approach and walk in and see if they're willing to talk to you. Now, it's probably better if you can call ahead, see if the gallery director is going to be there, see if they're, say, I'm going to be in town. I would love to stop in and see your gallery and maybe talk to you. They may say right then, we're not taking any new artists.
Yeah.
Don't bother us. That doesn't stop you from still going and
Scoping it out,
visiting and
Yeah.
getting a feel for the gallery, because sometimes when you walk in, you'll get a feel for the vibe of a place and you'll decide either this is a place, I see the way they interact with the public and the way they sell. This is definitely a place I'd like to have my work, and you start working toward building a relationship with them. Or you may walk in and be like, this doesn't feel right for me. This looked good on the internet when I researched it, and I like some of their work, but this doesn't feel like it's really the right place for me to be showing. And so being there, talking to people, and getting a view of the way the place is really laid out can give you a better feel for that. If you go face to face, it's always good to have either pictures on your phone or a print portfolio to show them. And I would recommend having 2 or 3 originals in your car, safely stored so people don't see them and steal them. That if you happen to get to talking to the art director or gallery director, and they say, well, this stuff's pretty nice, I'd love to see an original where I could really see your paint strokes and your technique and quality and everything, then you can say, hey, I happen to have a couple in the car. Do you want me to bring them in? And so that's a way to start kind of get things rolling. But
it hasn't
if
been
I were
working as
going
well
to
lately.
get back into the market, that's the direction I'd go again. What's that, Bruce?
Oh, you were just saying that things hadn't, the method hadn't been working as well lately because the market's so saturated.
It's saturated, yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the market looking for? I think it's very similar to the commercial market, that their business is sales.
Yeah.
So they're looking for, what does the public want? What do buyers want to buy? And we talked at the beginning about landscapes, number one, then still life, then figurative work is the smallest niche market within that. But quality and beauty really are ultimately what people want. They want to emotionally connect with the piece. But galleries, so here's the other trick with galleries. On the one hand, they want your work to be similar enough to what they already sell that it fits in the environment.
Sure.
But they don't want it to look so similar to an artist that they already represent that you're going to be in competition with.
Yeah.
And that is the other thing that gets tricky. Because you may be like, yeah, my work fits in here perfectly. And they're like, yeah, but we've already got people that do what you do. We don't need you.
Right.
So it is a balancing act. And with so many talented artists out there, it can be difficult to find the right niche, but it takes a lot of hard work. Travel around, research online, talking to people to get in. And sometimes you want to start small. There's 2 approaches.
The tangentials between what you're talking about, getting a gallery, and how you would go about approaching art directors.
Yeah, it's not that different, honestly. Like meeting these people who are potential gatekeepers for your career in person, always makes a big difference.
I mean, trying to connive's the wrong word, but get yourself into the places they're going to be, right?
Yeah.
We talk
and you guys know on the commercial side that if you're trying to get in with a big company, a gaming company, a book publisher, whatever, you go and you look at what they're already selling or what they're buying in the case of commercial and what they're printing on their products, and you say, is my work good enough to be in that mix? Can I give them what it is that they want?
Is it the right genre? Is it the right style?
In the fine art,
and so on.
Right. What does the fine art gallery carry? I had a gallery once out west that saw my work in one of the Oil Painters of America national shows, liked it, contacted me and said, would you like to be, we got this upcoming Western themed show, would you want to participate? I was like, yeah, sure. And then the owner got a hold of me and they're like, actually, I've been aware of your work ever since the OPA National, and I'd really love to represent you. Can I carry your work? And I was skeptical because like one of their number one sellers was paintings of pigs, baby pigs, looking over fences.
I've seen that. Yeah.
I don't think my work is a fit, and the price point of the pieces that you want is probably out of range of the stuff you're selling. We tried it for a year, and of course, it didn't sell. And then they started talking to me about lowering my price, and it's
No.
just like that. So I've had those gallery directors that loved my work and were passionate about it and promised me they were going to make me rich and famous, and then
Well,
it didn't work out. They
what
couldn't
else
sell.
are they supposed to say?
Well, not all of them told me they were going to be rich. I mean, I had some gallery owners that were really passionate about, I really like your work, and I really think it's, we can do great things for you. And then and the one guy was frustrated. He was in the Carolinas, and he was like, "The people around here are just idiots. They just don't know. They just don't know what they're missing. But it's not selling. I got to send the stuff back." I was like,
Yeah.
"Okay." So yeah, there's all these kind of things, and so sometimes, and
So,
Alan and I talked about before about starting kind of on the low end with the local galleries and the tent shows and all that. You work your way up as you build the quality before you go approaching bigger galleries. There are other people who are kind of coming from the other direction, where it like Morgan. Are you familiar with Morgan Weisling? He does Western. He started out. He grew up in L.A. And by 18, he was doing movie posters. He was working in a art supply store for the people for the Hollywood studios. They would come in and buy their stuff, and he would show them, the art directors his stuff. And he was good enough at 18 years old. He'd had a mentor that they hired him, and he started doing movie posters. And he did that for like, I don't know, a dozen years, 15 years or something. And he got burnt out on it, and he decided, kind of like you guys are talking about, you want the change, you want to go do fine art stuff. And he decides he wants to do fine art. And a buddy of his said, "Well, go to Scottsdale, Arizona. It's a good art market. And don't start at the bottom, because they might say yes. And then, you could have been up here. Start at the top. Go to the number one gallery in the city and show your work. And if they reject you, then work your way down."
mm-hmm.
So he went to the first gallery, and they actually did reject him. There's two galleries on Main Street in Scottsdale that are the two top galleries. And the first one said no. The second one, he went in, and back then he was actually carrying in originals. And he sat him against the wall and was talking to the art director. And while he's talking to the art director, customers walk in and start fighting over who gets to buy the paintings. Of course, he was immediately signed,
Yeah.
and he's been with them ever since. And he sells pretty much everything that he paints. And it's all early settler Western kind of stuff. And he's got a gorgeous painting style. And part of it is that Morgan, along with a number of other guys that are kind of my generation that are tops in the fine art gallery market, they all have a recognizable look to their work. And you've seen the same thing in commercial, where having some kind of a gimmick or a recognizable style will get you repeat clients.
Yeah.
You stand out. And so, Dan Gerhardt's is another one that he's got a palette and a style to his painting that you look at a Dan Gerhardt's painting, you know it right away. Scott Burdick's another one. He's very thick, painterly, beautiful work, stands out in the crowd. Morgan Weisling's another one. They each have, you see their work and you immediately know these guys' paintings. And so as the fine art market kind of tightened up, I found more and more galleries were wanting two things. Number one, do you have a recognizable style that doesn't compete with somebody else that's already hanging on our walls? And number two, do you already have 100,000 followers online?
Right.
That one is excruciating. I had a
So
convention.
then it's like, well, wait a minute, why am I paying you 50% if I've already got 100,000 followers?
Conventions and companies are starting to look at those kinds of metrics too now before they hire you. So it's really more of the same.
Yeah, I mean, it's all some people live in this idyllic world where wouldn't it be great if nobody had to work for a living and we could all just be artists? The problem with everybody being an artist is that you have no buyers. Art, and we touched on this before, art is not an essential.
It's a luxury.
It's a luxury item for people with disposable income and the passion and desire to own it. And if you get too much, it's supply and demand. If you get too much supply where art is everywhere and I can get anything from any, Like, well, why should I pay you that amount when I can go and get something else I like just as well over here for half the price?
Right. Well,
So
it's
the more,
precisely the problem with AI, and it's precisely the problem with all of these markets
yeah,
collapsing in on themselves
right.
and the
Well, and
demand
it's
side of
why
things
illustrators have
contracting.
talked about that their income or their pay hasn't gone up since the days of Norman Rockwell.
Yeah.
You know, but we're getting paid the same as they were back then. But cost of living is skyrocketing.
Yeah.
So it's the struggles of being an artist in the 21st century.
So you're looking to
The,
get into the illustration side of things just to add an additional leg on the stool, as opposed to thinking that the grass is actually greener on the other side of the fence.
um,
And I guess vice versa for us asking about the gallery market.
for right now, I am not actively pursuing my fine art and haven't been since 2016.
Okay.
Um, Partly because I've been busy working for the United States Mint, and partly because I've been learning digital painting and I've been wanting to get back to my illustration work. And I found I didn't want to paint the stuff that would sell in the galleries. I was tired of going down that road. It wasn't inspiring to me anymore. There's some guys who love going out and painting landscapes from life, or they love painting still lifes over and over and over again of the same flowers and bowls. To me, after a while, just copying nature, and this is a totally personal thing, there's nothing wrong with that. And I did it for years, but deep down, I'm a narrative illustrator.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like in my soul, that's who I am, have been since I was young. I
Right.
was told in junior high, the Renaissance is over, get over it. You need to go be an illustrator because you can't paint those kind of paintings for fine art. So I'm kind of coming back to that root for myself and being like, okay, to paint what I want to paint and have fun and enjoy my work, this is the direction for now that I want to go. Now, that does not mean that I won't go back to fine art at some
Right.
point to
Right.
add to, and I'm not bad mouthing any of these markets that I've
Sure.
been in. We kind of talked about how broad my career's been over the years, but right now, illustration is my focus, and the conventions are a part of that. How do I kind of add to the income by trying to sell direct to people with
Right.
prints?
By picking up a potential to make significantly more money than most of the illustration jobs
Right.
pay, or at least to have a way to sell the same art twice and
Mm-hmm.
thrice and so on.
We're both big advocates for something for lifetime value of an image. And Ron earlier in the show, Ron was saying, with the $2,000 to $5,000 range selling, being the highest, the most selling in gallery shows. How many paintings would you have to make at 50% and sell in a year
Mm-hmm.
versus you make a we both make a print of a painting and it can stay with us for years and years and just keep racking up money on the
Earning.
one painting.
Yep.
Um,
So, I mean, let's stick on that for a minute. You can take that route with fine art,
mm,
right? So, instead of just selling one original, you can create a painting and you can get into the market of limited edition prints.
Sure.
right.
And that market has shifted drastically since the 80s, partly because of people like Thomas Kincaid and Bev Doolittle and others that kind of, it's one thing when you say you've got a limited edition print and then you say it's a limited edition of 500,000
Mm-hmm.
on
Yeah.
this paper.
Right.
And then we're going to come out with another
Yeah. Yeah. It's not
200,000
not
on
really
canvas. And
not
another,
really very limited.
and it's a not very limited edition. And so in the 80s, people were, flooding to go and buy prints from these people because, oh, I got number, 5 of 500,000 and it's going to double in price in a year or whatever. And there
Yeah.
was it was tulips all over again. And then the market kind of collapsed, and the print market's still out there, but you're not going to see the kind of numbers that you did
Sure.
back then. But it is a way to make an image keep paying you. And if you can get enough images sold at a price point that a lot of people can afford, and it's an image a lot of people want to own, then you can make a substantial amount of money on a work of art that way.
Yeah,
But
and
then you
we
still
we
get
do
into,
actually sell some limited edition
Yeah, a lot
yeah,
of illustrators
prints and
do.
stuff
yeah.
at
Well, you can do open
conventions.
editions
Yeah,
as well, as fine art pieces, and that's basically what you're doing at
yeah,
these conventions, right? Is you're taking
yeah.
an
We've got
image
both. Yeah.
and you're selling it as fine art. Um, it's amazing to me. People always argue with me about my definition of fine art versus illustration, and I don't know why. To me, it's been pretty simple. Having been in both my entire career, is fine art sells itself, commercial art sells something else. Other than that, you're
Right.
using all the same art principles.
Yeah.
Good art is good art. It's a matter of what was its purpose to begin with. Can I
Yeah.
take an illustration and turn around and sell it as fine art? Yeah. Can I take a piece of fine art and turn around and use it as commercial art? Yeah.
Yep.
But what a lot of illustrators don't seem to understand is if I'm doing a piece for a gallery, there's no art director and no one is telling me what to paint. And most fine artists will tell you if your gallery is telling you what to paint, that's not somebody you want to be dealing with. It's not really fine art then. You're back to illustration. You're being art directed. And that's, commercial art, that's what you have for commercial art. You're being art directed. Somebody else is telling you what to paint. Fine art, you paint what you want, and then you go and find a market for it.
Well, aside from the idea, I suppose, that in fine art, you sell a certain thing and it's selling really well, and they're like, paint us more of that thing because it's selling, right?
Yeah.
So they're not telling you
Except then we talked about
specifically,
that before. You
like,
give them 5 more and then they don't sell. So
right, like we need this very specific pig peering over this very specific fence, but it's more of a we want more of that subgenre of paintings that
sure.
you did because those are selling.
Well, and you as an artist are going to say, okay, there's a range of things that I like painting, and there's a range of things that the public likes to buy. Where do those two intersect? Where I can paint something I enjoy that other people want to pay me for. And you're going to do more of that. And if you're painting stuff that nobody buys and it's sitting there piling up in your studio, after a while, you're going to be like, maybe I shouldn't paint any more of those because I'm running out of room to store them. So there's always that market influence. And I've said to people, if you really want to be a total purist and you want to paint whatever you want to paint and you don't care about marketing and sales and all that stuff, be a hobbyist.
Right.
Go get a job
Let
that
your
pays
job
your
pay
bills.
for the bills. Yeah.
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 And then do what you want to do. Um, and if you sell it, great. And if you don't, I've had some students that are like, I don't want to sell my work. I
Right.
don't I don't want. Yeah, I've had people offer to pay me, and I don't want to sell. It's like, okay, that's fine. I always taught like I'm going to teach you how to think and paint like a professional, but that doesn't mean that you have to be a professional.
Right.
You know,
People always, whenever I'm a huge cook. I love cooking. It's my passion these days. And people always ask me, how did you get into cooking like this? And it's always the same answer. It's like, well, I had to find another hobby when art became my job.
yeah. They
Uh,
say that's very healthy to find something else to do other than
and
sit in front of your computer or your easel all day long.
yeah, yeah. Some people do cooking. Some people have kids. the the funny thing about this is that we know where this story is going, right? You did actually end up. You're now art directed again. Well, not again, but you're kind of an illustrator now, working for the
Uh,
Mint.
well, yeah. Not only that, but I am starting to do work for gaming companies again.
Mm.
So I've got two that I'm working on projects for now. But yeah, the United States Mint. We talked about that. They do a call for artists every 2-3 years, pretty much, and it's open to anybody. But the type of stuff that they are looking for, they need artists who can do historically accurate, realistic rendering in pencil.
Pull up those images. You had some images. I just want people to see the drawings that you're doing and get an idea of what the day to day work is. I found this really interesting at Dragon Con when you were telling me like, oh, I've been working for the Mint for over a decade, and I'm thinking like, well, you must have a portfolio, right, that gets you in there, and but no, it's just a call for artists. They think you can do it. They call you
Yeah.
in.
Well, it's interesting because the latest call for artists, they actually hired a number of people with backgrounds in comic books and um, graffiti art, and they're trying to get a lot more diverse voices and not just personally diverse, but artistically diverse
Sure.
to interpret themes. And so I'm excited to see what's going to be coming out of this latest batch of artists as the jobs come through. But I can.
Well,
try to get
everything you
pulled.
described to me, the reason I wanted to bring it up is I kept wanting to say, "What's the catch?" Because you're making a living wage off of it, supporting your kids off of it, and the work is not as complex as the things that I'm doing for book covers and
Correct. This pays a lot better than what most game companies or book publishers would pay you.
and their drawings,
The drawings.
highly
And
technical
you
drawings, but still.
and you can do them traditionally with graphite or charcoal, or you could, at this point I do them all digitally, digital drawings, but they look like pencil drawings. This one was a traditional when I first started. So I
How
don't
many
know.
people do they have on? No, not on staff. How many people are they commissioning at once? Do you know?
So a job comes through. Every job that the United States, almost every job that the United States Mint does is, it comes through as a law passed by Congress. So the U.S. Mint doesn't just say, "Oh, we want to do this," and put it on a coin. The Congress actually has to pass a law and send it through, signed as a law, to them to say, "We have determined that a bill has been passed stating that we will create such and such a coin, commemorative or congressional gold medal." They spec out the amount of the different metals that'll be in it, the size, the number that will be produced. All of that is in the legislation. The U.S. Mint office in Washington, D.C. gets that paperwork, and then they will usually ask, out of the couple dozen of artists that in the AAP, they may have anywhere from 3 to maybe 10 of us at one time working on that job. And so
On the
they'll
same
send us the
image.
brief. Same image. So they'll send us the brief, and then usually there's outside liaisons that represent, depending on what the topic is, who may be giving us further information. So we'll have a phone call where we'll get to hear a little bit more about the topic, what maybe are the do's and don'ts, things we should or shouldn't represent, and how and why. And then it's up to us to interpret that in our own way. And some of them are pretty straightforward, like, portrait of Douglas MacArthur. It's like, okay, well, that's a portrait of Douglas MacArthur. There's not a lot of interpretation. It's a matter of finding what angle, what portrait to do. And then you want to draw it up as what they call a map for sculpt. So you're not trying to depict local value or color. You're not able to use atmospheric perspective or anything like that. You're
Right.
trying to delineate hard-edged specific shapes for them to sculpt that show the rise and fall of the planes, so that the sculptors in Philadelphia can take that image, if it's selected, and then create a sculpt out of it. And so from that picture, and I don't really like the angle of the lighting on that shot, but that was the coin that was made from it. It's a gold coin. And so, like I say, you'll have multiple artists that work on this. You get paid a flat fee for submitting at least one drawing for the subject. And usually we like to give them 2 to 3 to choose from. And so you get paid, it'll go through a couple of levels of edits, and then the time comes and it's all, when you first start with the U.S. Mint being government, you've got to go through on getting set up on their systems for payments and everything, which is a little bit time consuming up front. But once you're in, then it goes very smoothly. So once that time period is up, you go to the website and you submit the bill, and they're net 30. I've never been paid in, I think, more than 10 days. So they're very fast to pay. It's been great to work with in those regards.
And that's music to my ears.
Yeah. You don't have to chase them down. It's all very systematic. And then it just kind of goes into the ether, and you wait and see what happens. Months later, because these things are done a year to 2 years out.
Yeah.
Months later, you'll find that you get an email maybe saying, well, these are all the designs that we received that are now put on these templates in a very anonymous way, so nobody knows what artist did what. And they get sent off to 2 selection committees, the CCAC and the CFA, that then give their recommendations. And from those recommendations, it then goes to the Secretary of the Treasury who then eventually approves the design that was selected by those committees and by the liaisons. And then from there, then it goes to production. And if your work happens to be the one selected, then you get paid again as a selection fee.
Yeah.
And the selection fee is higher than the initial amount that you were paid to do the drawing. So you can make some very good money. During the pandemic, I had stopped teaching and I had stopped pursuing the gallery work. And I was only working for the U.S. Mint. And I made the highest income I've ever made in my career for the 2 years during the pandemic.
Bruce and I like to be really transparent about numbers, but since this is the U.S. government, we talked about this before the show. We weren't sure how much to share, but I can verify that the numbers are extremely competitive with at least the illustration jobs I'm getting, unless there's somebody out there working for, I don't know, a AAA game studio that's making more.
Yeah.
And I think
my
we know
income
at least
during
a
the
couple
pandemic
of
actually
people.
doubled over what it's
What's
usually
that,
been.
Bruce?
I was just going to say, I think we know a couple of fantasy illustrators who have actually also gotten in on this. Lucas Durham and Andrew
Yep.
Sides, perhaps.
I didn't know Lucas was doing it. You had mentioned that, but I didn't know if he had actually
I
gotten
think
in.
he's not currently
Yeah, Lucas
doing
is
it,
in
but
with us.
he was doing that for a while.
He was the previous call for artists, I think. So he's been in it maybe 3 or 4 years at least, I think. Maybe longer. I can't remember when he signed on. I saw that we were talking about people at Ringling College before. Dominic Saponaro, is that his name? But he's teaching there at Ringling now, and he's joined the U.S. Mint. So, yeah, there's a number of guys, and he does book covers and stuff. So a number of people that are in the program. Quite a few who are illustrators. We have technical illustrators, people who come from scientific illustration, wildlife illustration, historical illustration backgrounds, design work. The one guy that did a bunch of work with us, Chris Costello, actually has designed fonts as well as been a designer of many other things. So yeah, some of these folks are famous in other areas. One of the guys that works with us used to be in printing and engraving, designing our dollar bills, and then switched over and is now with the U.S. Mint doing coin work.
I'm going to ask you, is it hard work?
Is it hard work? Oh, what do you mean by hard? Hard in what way?
It's, to me, doing what I'm doing every day. These are highly technical drawings, but it seems like less work than I do. I guess that's what I'm saying. It seems
there's more time probably researching on the front end and putting together all the paperwork for your assignment and release, legal forms on the other end than I spend on the actual drawings. In most cases, a lot of it is trying to come up with a new way of looking at things. And so this piece I just stopped on here for Homestead, it was one of the national parks coins that we did. And coming from a narrative illustration kind of background, my first take on this, it's like homesteaders. Well, what do they need? Well, they're going to till the soil and they got to build a house. And so I did a scene of like the dad's out tilling the field and the son's chopping wood and the mom's hanging clothes at the line and all this. And then I started really trying to narrow it down in my head to more of the essence. It's like food, water, shelter.
Right.
How do I symbolize that in the most basic way? And I came up with this. And it was funny because I said these get sent to committee as anonymous pieces. And so afterward, one of the guys from one of the committees went to the woman who's in charge at the U.S. Mint there in this program and said to her, showed my first picture of the family and said, this is what we don't want to see. It's too narrative. It's too postcard. It's, tell your people, don't do this. And then they showed the piece that they selected, and they said, "No, this is exactly what we want.
Really?
Whoever did this is great." And they didn't realize it was the same
guy.
artist who did both pieces. But it was kind of a turning point for me that I figured out that I needed to think more like a designer than as an illustrator.
Leaning into the iconography. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you symbolize something that's going to be on a 1-inch piece of metal?
Right.
With no color, no value, a polished background maybe to help kind of separate it. And then you got to get into the polish issues.
Something you learn, I guess I've learned in illustration too, is when I was first doing book cover illustrations, you'd have a really great image to your eye, and then this all goes back to composition. But the people would say, "Well, yeah, but it's not going to look good as a catalog image, the 1-inch image that people see on Amazon." And then the same thing for cards. It might be a great image full screen, but the cards, how big's a card? Very small.
Right.
It's got to be immediately
an inch by
recognized.
an inch worth of space to work with.
Yeah. That's why it's good to start out doing thumbnails. And that's actually one of the things that I figured out that was helpful to me in coming up with ideas for the coins is I will, whatever size the coin is going to be, I will go into like Adobe Illustrator and just create a circle that's that size and duplicate it across the page and print that out. And I will start out doing my initial sketches at size because it gets me thinking about how it's going to fit. And I don't do that in every case, but I still try to think, how big is this actually going to be when it gets produced?
Right.
Yeah, and you're losing a lot of the crutches that I feel like I talked about this earlier that I stand on. You can't do the environmental perspective or the atmospheric perspective. I mean, you can't hide a character in mist, or you can't rely on dark and light tones to do the work for you.
Or color.
Or color.
Yeah. Now, obviously, something like this, I was playing with that fisheye lens effect and that sense of being up high, looking down. And so size, overlap, shape, those are the kind of things you'd be dealing with working for the United States Mint.
Mm-hmm. Nice. I don't know if I have any other questions about that. It's just neat. It's neat to me. I really I enjoy that it exists. I'm definitely going to apply next time they
One of the things, once in a while, if you go back to, hang on, I got to get up to my other screen, to that one, the people at that location at the Homestead National Monument actually wanted us to come out and see the place. So we got flown out, all expenses paid, to spend a couple of days and see the site. So once in a while you get stuff like that. I had this other piece selected here that they actually invited me out for the unveiling of that coin at the Ozark Riverways. And so I got to be there, get introduced, meet famous people, got to meet an astronaut, sign autographs. So, it's once in a while some fun stuff like that happens. The Mint used to have symposiums every about 2 years to have us all go to DC and learn about kind of the ins and outs, what we should be doing, shouldn't be doing, a lot of the legal stuff. Always a long legal discussion about copyright. And at this point, they're like, some of you have been with us a decade. You don't need another symposium. So we're just going to invite the newbies to come and learn about this stuff. But there's always been opportunities.
Such a history buff. That's why it stands out to me. Yeah,
we've done a lot of military things over the years, which I don't have too much of the military in here. There was one I did for the cars in Indiana. There was the drawing for that one. This was the one we looked at before. That's the one of the military pieces that I did that got turned into a congressional gold medal. So those are bigger. Even the small one they sell to the public is, I think, 5 inches. I think they sell a 5-inch and a 3-inch, if I remember correctly. And then the one they actually give to the recipients is larger than that still. So and they're deeper. So you get to get into a lot more detail on a congressional gold medal than you do, say, a quarter.
Do you get copies of these when they come out?
No.
Okay.
Well, if I go buy one, I get one.
No contributor copy like we get to enjoy with some of our clients, Alan.
No, they early in the program, I think that they tried that and they ran into some issues with it and they stopped doing it.
People running around saying they got gold medals.
Well, no. I won't
They
get
could
into
give
it.
you a small one.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's fun though to do a piece like this and then to go and buy a copy for yourself and have it. You start building up your own personal collection and to
Right.
be able to look at them and think, here's something that's going to last generations and generations. I mean, possibly hundreds or even thousands of years. We have coins that go back to the Roman era, right?
Right.
That we know about these people, and I get to play a
Archaeologists will
part
be
in
digging
this.
it up someday.
Yeah, and so if you do the piece, come in here. That's
Just
what you
about
get.
to ask if you get to
Yeah.
sign it.
You get initials.
You get initials.
So my RS is on every coin that I have designed. And then usually there is, I'm not sure, up here, Phoebe did this one. And so there's the sculptor's
Mhm.
initials on the right and the artist initials on the left.
They didn't always have the artist name on Magic cards, did they, Bruce? Isn't that
I'm not sure on that. I think that they did. I think that might have been one of the many little things where they're like, well, we're not paying you much, but at least we're doing this for you. That's
I
why we
seem to
have
remember.
artist proofs as well. It's literally just a leftover of the fact that they didn't have money to spend on that first batch of artists, and so they're like, okay, well, you can use these things to maybe get other work from other clients.
Yeah, I seem to remember. I'm probably getting it wrong if you don't remember that Todd said that they didn't put his name on some of the cards, or maybe there's a mix-up. But I I
Maybe
thought
a
they had to
mix-up.
fight to get. I thought they had to fight to get the names on there. I know that you can't sign book cover paintings because they don't want your name on there. It's inside the book, and I try and convince them. I used to have in my contract that it has to be printed on the back, but
I just did a piece for a company that they said, if you're going to sign it, we want it integrated into the illustration somehow so that it
yeah,
doesn't look like
Stand
a
out.
signature, or
Yeah.
leave it off.
I
Just like
have. Yeah, I have done that. If anybody wants to go on it, well, you can't because they're not full size images online. But if you had my portfolio, you go on a treasure hunt and see all the things places I've hidden my name in my
Mhm.
paintings. Don't tell anybody. Don't tell Sean and Grim Oak. But I will say that whenever I do really detailed world, even interiors like maps, I'll often make an anagram of my name and sneak it in
Cool.
there. It's just whatever keeps it fun. You gotta leave your mark where you can. So
Well, not to mention, like there is a value to your business of having your name on your art. I was out of the habit of including my signature or anything in my art for a very long time, and I'm trying to force myself to make it a habit now because I do think over the long term, people being able to, collectors and such being able to find that
yeah,
maker's mark in there
and
does
you,
make a difference.
and you get used to not signing it. So I see where you're coming from. I I started re-signing them for another reason, which is when we were doing Todd Lockwood's art book, uh, there was no record of what paintings were done
Hmm.
in what year, other than the ones that were in his signature, and he didn't start doing that until like the early thousands. So it was almost impossible to keep track of the dates. So I've started doing that now. You like to think, oh, I'll remember when I painted, Spider-Man or something, but
Good to keep records
yeah,
somewhere.
Yeah.
yeah, you never do.
Yeah. With the fine art, again, the question wasn't just, I mean, everybody signs fine art, but the question was always about dating it. Do you want to put the year and a copyright symbol or something on it? And part of the argument against it was, well, if the work doesn't sell quickly, do you really want a date on there that says it's 5 years old?
Thought of that. Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of people are like, yeah, under American U.S. copyright law, a work is copyright from the moment of authorship.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to have the copyright symbol on it. I get a kick out of some of the people online that say, well, I can use the image because I found it online, so it's copyright free. It's like, no, it's not.
Same logic that the AI people are using. Oh, well, we can just scrape it. It's out here, free
Right.
for us. Nope.
Well, in their cases, they're saying, well, you're on our platform and it's in the fine print of our contract with you that when you agreed to open an account with us, you agreed that we have access to everything you place on here.
Well,
Which is a little
there's
different when it's just
yeah,
out on the
there's that too, but
internet.
there's
So,
also like your garden variety people, prompter types, like grabbing art and using it to create like little subsets that they're using,
right.
and using that kind of argumentation that's completely
Yeah.
false.
I had a guy contact me once years ago before we got into all the AI stuff, and I think Google or somebody had come out with one of these reverse trace on images where
Hmm.
you could, like, if you had an image, you could go and find every place else that it was on the
Yeah,
internet.
yeah.
And he was a photographer, and he found out there was a guy who had stolen one of his photos and somehow done some manipulation of it and then was selling it as his own image.
Hmm.
And he started finding the only way to get this guy kicked off of whatever place he was selling online was to get enough artists to complain against him. So he was going and finding the rest of us that this guy had
Right,
stolen
right.
from and making us aware of it. And he had taken a painting of mine and hadn't even changed it. It was exactly like the image I had posted on my website that was being sold in a fine art gallery at the time,
Hmm.
and he was selling it as prints online as his own image.
Wow.
And I let the gallery director know, and she called and had about an hour-long talk with him about copyright law. I guess it was not pretty,
That happens
but
more than you think. I mean,
and he was
people.
like, "I didn't know." It's like, yeah,
Yeah,
you
right.
graduated from an art school. Don't give me you didn't know.
Yeah.
We've seen it on photo bashes on book covers. There was a recent Magic card one with Donato. Magic's had it happen 2 or 3 times recently, haven't they? Something like that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they've I think had some growing pains in terms of like they sort of increased the number of artists that they were working with. They burned through some art directors, and so they kind of had like a lot of fresh art directors as well. And in this case, they had an illustrator from, well, I don't know, maybe we can call her an illustrator, from the UK, who had sort of made her career in um, doing pulpy kind of detective noir type covers that were reminiscent of things from the 40s and 50s and so on. But it turns out she'd just been uh, literally copying stuff from those works from the 40s and 50s. And because people weren't all that familiar with them,
Mhm,
she would get away with it. But then she started getting magic cards and started doing the same approach and started grabbing art from other magic artists and as well as other famous artists from fantasy, and was suddenly in a position where people actually recognized
mhm,
poses and hands and various things that she had Frankensteined together.
mhm. Yeah, whenever possible, I either pose it myself or I hire somebody else to pose to avoid some of that. But occasionally there's times where you just either don't have the time to do that or you don't have the means to do it. And I've done some Frankenstein kind of stuff, and that gets into going back to the U.S. Mint with our very in-depth discussions about copyright as to how much can you use or borrow and how much do you change. And there are ways that you can use a hand from here and a leg from there and a head from another place, and piece stuff together to create your own pose, and you're safe. But the
But you'd
problem
have
gets
to
to be
paint
when,
over it quite
oh
a
yeah,
bit, which
I'm
this
talking about
person,
as a
yeah.
back pocket reference, not as the finished
Yeah,
work by
no,
any means.
like this was literally like it was the hand from a Donato and face from a
Yeah,
Boris and so on.
that's a little extreme. Yeah.
I'm going to switch it around. We always struggle. I think even in when I was first doing this podcast, we always struggle with like giving useful information to people that might need it because we're not far ahead, right? But we're at a point where we're not asking the same questions we were when we first started out, especially with things like conventions or getting into the industry. And we even did a Q&A, 2 episodes ago, where we I think we even asked ourselves some of our own questions, just trying to get useful information out there. That said, Ron's trying to break into the illustration industry, do some conventions, things like that. I thought we'd turn it around and do a podcast hanging out with Ron where, where Ron asks us
So
questions
here's
on
the
his
question.
podcast.
We're going on 6:00. Do you want to like close this one down and then start a new one to post
Yeah,
something,
we
or?
can do that if you want. Do you want to do that, Bruce?
Sure.
Split it up, and I can release
That's
like a
fine.
two-parter in case
Because we're
anyone's got
like hour and
you know.
40 minutes into this one.
Well, yeah, I didn't figure it would be that long, but all right, let's do it. We'll see you next time. Thanks for hanging out. Ron, where can people find you?
RonSandersArt.com or RonSandersFineArt.com.
Wonderful. All
I
right,
still
and
have
then
fine art out there floating around.
yeah, and so if anybody wants to look at that while they're looking along with the listening to the podcast, although this is the end of the podcast, so they really can't do that. Great. Check out Ron Sanders Fine Art. It was great to have you, Ron. We'll see you
Thanks
on
very
the
much. It's been fun.
we'll see you on the
Talk
next
to-
episode.
Well, you'll talk to us more next time.
Can't wait to be on your podcast.
Sounds good. Let's do it.